Okay. Hello. Let me first of all greet Ms. Vignaraja, who had to leave actually, Madam Suwang Mongkol and Doctors Tejvirak and Putrakol, who was speaking right before me, and basically try to bring your attention to the fact what has happened 4 or 5 years ago when United Nations, with the governments of all the countries, came up with this concept of Sustainable Development Goals. Now, as opposed to Millennium Development Goals, which was another set of targets before, there are two major distinguishing factors behind Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. One, SDGs were for all the countries, not only for the developing countries. So we had the whole globe, all the governments aligned with that. There was the second interesting aspect of Sustainable Development Goals. There is goal number 17, which, if you have noticed, it's not a goal as such, it is a process, which is named partnerships. Now, if we open the brackets behind that process, it's actually the placeholder to bring in private sector into targeting Sustainable Development Goals. There was a major recognition that it's impossible to achieve such an ambitious goal if private sector is not integrated and involved in doing that. However, in the beginning, it was not clear how to do that, and it still is quite a challenging question how to involve private sector in addressing Sustainable Development Goals. So should we go to the private sector and ask for some money to do something towards Sustainable Development Goals? Maybe, but most probably that would be a very linear way of thinking. Because Sustainable Development Goals are something more systemic, so we need to have a more systemic approach to that. So basically the vision was we need to work with the private sector by involving all possible resources, not only money, but human knowledge, know-hows, entrepreneurial acumen to come up with solutions towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the way we try to address it, we came up with the whole new vision of how we can try to stimulate the private sector to start addressing, and not only private sector, but also the governments to start addressing Sustainable Development Goals. So we came up with this framework of SDG finance, and there was this strategic will here, and it had the left part of that, here is on the screen, is the concept of how we work with private sector. I represent the structure which is called SDG Innovative Finance. So what we try to do, we try to work with the source of capital and try to direct that capital into something which is impactful from the perspective of SDGs to the activities of the private sector, which is targeting Sustainable Development Goals. So we are working with both parts, the source of capital and the destination of the capital, or supply of capital or demand of capital. Now, the point here is that, okay, now we have capital going from here to there, but we speak about SDGs. So how to make sure that SDGs are happening? So the only way to do it is to put something in the middle and start measuring the impact. Without the measuring, without attesting that impact happens, the flows between the capital markets to the businesses will be, undermined, basically, from the SDGs perspective. So I'm part of this group, which is based here in Bangkok, and we work on those concepts. Now, you might say, but listen, the concept of sustainability always was there. Yes, it always was there. We know from mid-80s, there is something what we call a sustainability sweet point. So sort of overlap between the interest of shareholders and interest of stakeholders. And we do believe that there is a space where business can work not only for the good of its shareholders, but also addressing stakeholders. And stakeholders here being everybody, from employees, local communities, government, neighborhood, etc. So we know that this is there, but and some activities are happening. And we speak about CSR, corporate social responsibility, we speak about responsible business, we speak about sustainable business. Recently, for the last 10 years, we came up with this concept of impact investment. Now, unfortunately, people start using those very interchangeably. So when we speak about impact investment, that usually covers also sustainable investment, and everything is mixed up with the concept of sustainable finance. So there is a lot of sort of overlaps and misunderstanding of what is what in that system. Now, the way to explain it is the following. Now, from one hand, we do have the traditional investing or traditional businesses where the major purpose of the business is to make the profit, maximize the profit, and that's the ultimate purpose of their existence, right, of the private sector. Now, here is where we do see the concept of sustainable, corporate social responsibility. This is when the business tries to do something good to the community, to the neighborhood, basically trying to show that they are not so bad. There is something that could be done by us to the rest of our surrounding. Next stage is what we call a socially responsible investing or responsible business. This is when the business says, oh, wait a bit, there are some values, some principles that we should comply with. And those principles are, some came from Global Compact, some came from something called UNPRI or PRI now, Principles of Responsible Investment. So these were like values and principles that business agrees to follow. And there are several sets of them. Don't discriminate women, don't exploit kids, don't cut trees. I'm oversimplifying for the sake of presentation, but those are principles, and what business does, we try to comply with those principles. And the maximum what we can do is basically integrate those principles or integrate the compliance with those principles in the business processes, whether that relates to the supply chain, production, or sales, but it's the matter of compliance. Now, the next stage is when we speak about environmental or social governance, ESG, or sometimes referred as sustainable business. This is when we are saying, wait a bit, besides this concept of compliance or not doing something wrong, can we speak of doing something right? So, and this is much better than previous. And the next one is impact investing. Now, impact investing, the major difference here is that when we speak of doing something right, that something needs to be measured. So what we are talking about is prioritizing impact along with the business performance targets. So impact targets becomes another target, another corporate target. And once we have a target, we need to parameterize it, start measuring it, and also start tracking our progress towards that impact. And this is when the concept of SDGs come into the play. Because what is SDGs? Those are goals that needs to be achieved. Those goals are parameterized, and we try to understand whether through our activities we can contribute to achievement of those goals. Now, there are several systems of interpreting what approach is to be used at what stage, to be used at addressing what type of problem. But generally speaking, what we have here as well is that some approaches are good for basically screening the negative aspects of the business, trying to minimize the negative aspects. You build a plan, you need to cut the trees, let's make sure that only few trees are cut. But it's better if you cut the trees, you go and try to plant even more trees. So this is how we move along this curve. Now, from our perspective, it's okay if the business is on this side. What we try to do is to try to nudge and push it to go through that journey and become ultimately an impact investor. We are not speaking about the philanthropy. That's another aspect of things, but today we are talking about the business. So this is as much as we can push business towards the concept of impact investing. So now the concept of impact investing is about not only not harming, not only doing something good, but actually coming up with specific solutions that are contributing to the impact, in our perspective, to the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, we do understand that, it's impossible to persuade the business to start doing that unless there is a proof that it is going to produce not only an impact benefit, but also the business benefit. So as of now, there are a lot of statistical evidence that those companies which are going through that path, let's call it a path of sustainability, we'll be speaking about a degree of that sustainability a bit later on, but there is a statistical evidence that they perform better. The profit is better, the revenue is better, and overall risk management, and in terms of the long-term timeline, is much better. So no one today is questioning that fact, that the sustainable companies are more profitable. Well, there is some questioning about the causality. So what causes what? We are sustainable, that is why we are more profitable, or we are more profitable, that is why it allows us to become a bit more sustainable. Okay? We do believe that actually the act of targeting sustainability aspects, the act of targeting the impact, makes companies more sustainable, and there is sort of a special scientific evidence behind it. And on the other hand, depending on the timeline, as you can see here, there were several sort of buzzwords used in the industry. We're speaking about CRI, socially responsible investments, in the previous century. When we were speaking about ESGs, now we are speaking about impact investment. And now we are speaking about SDGs and ESGs and how those are connected with each other. There is even this notion that, this concept of impact investing has actually created a fourth sector in the economic setup. Fourth, meaning the first one being business, second one being government, and we know how the relationship works, right? And when there was a third sector, where we start speaking about third sector in the last, somewhere in 80s, 90s, last century, which was representing so-called non-for-profit players. And all of a sudden now we speak about the fourth sector, which is a bit different from the third sector. Because as opposed to the third sector, which tries to address externalities, tries to address social environmental issues by basically getting money either from businesses or from governments to do something good, and we also as United Nations agencies play in that area, the fourth sector is saying, okay, listen, we will not burn money, we would rather try to do business at the same time addressing the impact. So impact is part of our business. It is as important as making money. So we are speaking now about this emergence of the fourth sector, which is small, but it's growing. Initially, people were thinking about the fourth sector as something very narrow, related to the structures that we usually refer as social enterprises. But now, the concept is no. It's for businesses. It's businesses moving into that area and becoming what we call impact ventures, impactful businesses. So what we are talking about here, again, we are talking about from compliance to impact targeting. Yes, sustainability compliance is very good. It's even better to do the value alignment, to align with human rights, align with certain standards of governance, some environmental values, but it's much better if you target an impact. If you make an impact as an objective, so that you can measure whether your activities were more effective or less effective. Which activity contributed more, which activity contributed less. That is why this concept of nudging and going from shareholder value to stakeholder value, at the same time trying to make an impact as an objective, and again, from our perspective, when we speak about impact, that's sustainable development goals, at least for next 15 years, next 10 years. Oh, by the way, it's only 5 years has gone. And we are still not really there on track addressing that impact target. So this is actually what we need to do. Now, the major question is, okay, but what it is, how you prove that shifting to impact measurement actually is going to produce a business benefit. Apparently, yes, it will be producing better impact. What about better business performance? How that happens? Now, when we speak about the impact, we try to measure it, we try to parameterize it, and impact is not a simple matter. It's very complex, and we'll be speaking about that a bit later. Now, to measure the impact, for example, it's not enough to say, oh, you know what, 50% of my labor in my plant are women, so I've resolved the issue. No. What needs to be said that those are women, this is the level of their salary, this is the level of their education, this is the amount of free time, this is what happens with their families, whether kids have access to education, to healthcare, etc. So when we speak about the impact, it's not just one compliance, it's not just one indicator, it's a multitude of different things to measure. And when you speak about the impact measurement, all of a sudden what you get is some sort of like a big dashboard of an airplane. So you start looking at your business through a magnifying glass. Now, you might say, yes, it might be a bit of a headache, because all of a sudden, instead of tracking 5, 10 indicators, profit, cash flow, EBITDA, market share, etc., all of a sudden you have 100, I'm not exaggerating. Actually, there is a system called Impact Reporting International Standards. We have a matrix of different indicators, and this was before SDGs, by the way, and we have today over 700 different indicators. So all of a sudden, you have this multitude of things to look after. And you might say, yeah, it's a headache. Yeah, definitely it is a headache. But because of that, now imagine if you try to manage your business with a big magnifying glass. So what are the benefits? The most obvious one is PR, right? Because now your employees think that you do something useful. Your customers think that you are a better company. Not that obvious ones is because of that big magnifying glass, you start understanding new niches, new markets, new opportunities. Second, again, all things equal, because you have much better picture of what's happening around your company or within your company, the volatility, overall risk comes down. Second, when you prioritize impact in your own management team, your own governance structure, that cascades down and that makes your managers to think in a much long-term perspective. Because when we speak about impact, it's not just a result for 1 year. It is a result for many years. 5, 6, 8 years. So the perspective all of a sudden becomes much longer term. So we have better governance. And now a small business problem. You have business A and you have an equivalent business B. Business A is managed only by looking at 5 indicators, and business B is managed by looking at 30 different indicators. So with all other conditions equal, which one will be performing better? You tell me. Apparently business B. And this is what we have seen. My previous slide was about that, about the indicators, which are there, and there are many studies. This one which I brought is from Harvard Business School, but there are many studies done in America, in Europe, in Asia, and the proof is there. Now, what that means from our perspective, from the perspective of those who try to target and bring in the SDG agenda. Now, what we try to do mission-wise, we're saying, wait, now today's businesses are making all their business decisions based on 2 major factors. Again, I'm oversimplifying, but 2 things are considered: profit and the risk, right? Or revenue and the risk. Those are the 2 things that usually are considered when making any sort of business decision. What we are trying to do, we are saying, wait a bit, let's us to bring the 3rd component into that, which is impact. And impact in the context of sustainable development goals. So whatever decision you make, why don't you consider what will be the effect or affect of that decision vis-a-vis the impact or vis-a-vis the sustainable development goals? Can we achieve that? Now, if you start managing your business in such a way, this is what we try to promote, to advocate, and to preach, and to convert people in doing that. Now, but we do understand that it's not easy to implement this concept, because we need different instruments of infusing this 3rd component into the decision-making of different type of businesses. First of all, businesses are very different. So one thing is a startup, another thing is multinational corporation, or large infrastructure PPP project with the government. So for each of those clusters, we need to come up with a wise methodology, wise instrument to help the businesses to have the 3rd component in their decision-making as a component of decision-making. So that is why we create different instruments to do that, but the major one is basically to come up with an instrument, with a methodology, with a set of approaches which would allow them to easily, or relatively easily, manage the impact. Now, yes, UNDP specifically works with private sectors or private sector players, with businesses for a long time. You might have heard about our special sort of projects related to human rights and business. Our special project called Fair Business, which is about the corporate governance, etc. Those are the projects which are targeting compliance and alignment part. Today I'm here to speak about impact measurement, so which is the next stage of that. And there are 2 initiatives that we are talking about. One is called BCTA, Business Call to Action. And the second is called SDG Impact. Now, SDG Impact works on policy side of impact, trying to come up with standards or assurance of impact, assuring the measurement process, etc. While BCTA is one of those structures which were set up initially to promote inclusive businesses, but we have also a part which start actually looking at the impact measurement and working with the companies on how to measure the impact. Now, but before going to that, let me sort of jump to the impact as a concept. Now, impact is quite a complex thing to deal with. And it's not about the multitude of different indicators. And we need to understand that complexity in order to understand the shift from moving from ESGs to the SDGs and SDG contribution. Now, I brought a small, very simple example here, trying to explain the complexity of impact. See, for example, we want to plant a tree. Very simple impact, right? So first of all, the first challenge we have, we need to define what is impact. Do we speak about just a tree? Or we speak about a tree with its roots? Or we speak about a tree with the roots or fruits on that tree? So first, we need to define the impact and understand what that means. Second, the breadth of the impact. Now, let's suppose we planted a tree. Nice. Now, but what will happen with the grass and other plants around that tree? Will they benefit or maybe not at all? It depends. Maybe the plants around it will benefit because there is a tree, now there is sort of moisture in the water, in the soil, so we are benefiting out of that. But maybe because of the tree, it shades the sun, and the plants under the tree are not basically getting that, right? So there will be pluses and minuses here. And this is what we need to understand. Third aspect, what we call a depth of the impact. We planted a tree and we water it so that it grows. But some water comes from the clouds. Someone else is watering it as well. So we do need to understand how much is our contribution to create an impact. How much that impact would happen anyway without us going and watering it, right? But the most fascinating thing is about something which is called a risks related to impact. Now imagine our task is to plant only 3 trees, right? So we can plant those 3 trees in a small land lot of 100 square meter. We can plant those 3 trees in 3 different land lots, or we can plant those trees in a big land lot of 1,000 or 3,000 square meter. In our typical reporting, we would say, yeah, 3 trees are planted. So the cases will be similar. But when we look at that from the risks perspective of impact happening, not happening in the future, the risks are very different. Even more, depending on what type of risks are, some case might be more risky in one context, the other case might be more risky in the other context. If we speak about the trees as a forest, probably having 3 trees on a small land lot is not very good for the forest fire, right? If we speak about the trees as a place for a habitat of biodiversity of birds, having 3 trees in a big land lot is more risky for the birds to fly from one tree to another. So depending on the context, risk might be also changing. So now again, I tried to explain in very simple terms the type of challenges that we have to deal with when we speak about impact. Many of your businesses, when you do financial management, especially the financial risk management, you might have seen those type of exercises happening. But in case of finance, again, you deal with a couple of indicators. When we speak about impact, we deal with many indicators. So it's much more complex phenomena that we have to deal with. Now, and what our project does is basically trying to help with that aspect. Now, what has happened in the world? There have been many, over 50 different ways of measuring the impact. So we get together and get combined under this concept of impact measurement project, and we came up with these principles of how the impact are to be measured. And those principles are here. It's about what is impact, what is our contribution, who is the stakeholder, who is actually a beneficiary of that impact, who is experiencing the impact, what is our additional role, and what are the risks behind it, okay? But now, the most interesting thing here is that, okay, how this concept of impact is related to ESGs. The interesting fact is when we look at those indicators which are used in ESGs, in environment, social, and governance, most of those indicators are about our activities and maybe some outcomes, well, outputs which are produced by those activities, 97%. It's not about the impact that those activities or those efforts have produced. So we report about what we have done, but we do not report about what we have achieved. What we have achieved from the perspective of sustainable development goals. So this is the type of issue that Business Call to Action, our project, our initiative tries to resolve while working with businesses. Now, the way to do it is through a sequence of steps, is to understanding why we need to measure the impact, is planning the specific activities, when monitoring, collecting data, and interpreting, analyzing, and making adjustments into our models. Now, overall, this initiative is there, and it is quite active here in Asian markets. We have sort of large membership of those of the businesses in Business Call to Action, but so the initiative itself is about inclusive business, but we have an impact lab, which is actually an online system which is there for the last 3 years, and any business can go and register itself there, just get the login, and do a self-assessment. So you do not need to invite an advisor, an expert to do it. There is a process described for self-assessment, though BCTA is there to help you. So over 70 companies have been helped by BCTA so far in all parts of the world, doing this self-assessment from the impact perspective. But it's there. We will provide you with a link. You can go and register and try to do it yourself. And again, we speak about self-assessment rather than side attestation or the certification aspect of that. I want to bring a couple of cases, real cases, of companies who has gone through this exercise with BCTA. Now, one case is quite a known name to you. I think many of you knows that big brand. We basically have operations in Burkina Faso. We work with women. We try to produce the shea butter, and we work with the women who are collecting the plant and provide to their collection centers, etc. Now, the specific impact aspect was about exactly what I've just described, about the workforce, about the impact, about the level of salary, about the level of education, healthcare, not only for women, but also for their families. Now, once company went through this process and start addressing the impact, guess what has happened? The network, or those who were willing to work for the company, immediately get expanded. So we start collecting the raw materials from much farther areas. And because of that, A, the quality of that went up, B, the amount went up. So first, the impact has been produced through specifically addressing the impact related to workforce, and there was apparent business benefit. There are a lot of things I can talk about the impact, how it is measured, what are the things which are there, and those who know me know that I am sort of absolutely converted person and try to advocate and preach it to everybody. But because of the time, I just want to conclude by saying that the way to look at the future is to contribute to the future. When we speak about being good for the future, is not enough. When we speak about being good to our neighbors, to our children, to our country, is not enough unless we speak about a specific contribution. And when we speak about that specific contribution, we need to know what that contribution achieves. And when we speak about the Sustainable Development Goals, these are absolutely, absolutely unique global goals which are there to which we can contribute. When we speak about the measurement, that's a way to understand how much you can specifically contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. And you need to have that tool to do it, to be able to say, okay, this decision, this activity, this business has contributed to that, and this much. So for that, the tool exists, and do come, and we are here to help you to do it and to facilitate the overall process. Thank you.